I stared at my phone screen, my hands trembling so violently that I nearly dropped it on the polished conference room table. The text message from my sister Serafina was only 3 words long, but those 3 words made my blood run cold. You destroyed us. Below it, another message popped up. Then another. And another. My father, how could you be so selfish? My mother, we raised you better than this. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Your sister is homeless because of you. The messages kept flooding in, each one more accusatory than the last. Each one, a knife twisting deeper into my chest. But here's what they didn't know. What they refused to understand. I didn't destroy them. I simply refused to let them destroy me. If you've ever felt trapped in a toxic family dynamic, ever been the scapegoat while someone else got all the love and support, then please stay with me because this story might resonate with you more than you know. And if you appreciate honest stories about setting boundaries and reclaiming your life, hit that like button and subscribe, because I share more real-life lessons on this channel. Drop a comment below about your own experiences with family expectations. I read every single one. But let me take you back to where this all started. Because understanding how I got to that moment of being called a destroyer requires understanding the entire painful journey that came before it. I was 28 years old, working as a staff accountant at a mid-sized firm in downtown Seattle, living in a cramped studio apartment that cost more than it should, and still drowning in $70,000 of student loan debt from my accounting degree. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, built from scratch with zero help from my family, despite their comfortable upper-middle-class lifestyle. Every morning I woke up at 6. I made instant coffee because I couldn't afford the good stuff, and took 2 buses to get to work because I didn't have a car. Meanwhile, my older sister Serafina lived in a beautiful craftsman house in Queen Anne with her husband Damon. I drove a BMW that my parents had helped them lease, and worked part-time at a boutique art gallery because, as my mother always said, Serafina has such refined tastes, she needs a career that nurtures her creativity. The disparity had always been there, woven into the fabric of our family, like a stain that everyone pretended not to see. When we were kids, Serafina got piano lessons at the prestigious Hoffman Academy, while I was told we couldn't afford music lessons for both of us. When she turned 16, my parents bought her a used Honda Civic with a red bow on top. When I turned 16, I got a card with $50 and a suggestion to save up for a bus pass. When Serafina graduated from her liberal arts college with a degree in art history and $30,000 in debt, my parents paid it off within a year. When I graduated with my accounting degree and $70,000 in loans, I was told that I had chosen a practical career path and would be able to pay it back easily with my future salary. The pattern was so consistent, so persistent, that I had learned to stop expecting anything different. I told myself I didn't need their help, that I was stronger for being independent, that their favoritism actually taught me valuable life skills. I became an expert at making excuses for them, at convincing myself that maybe they were right. Maybe Serafina just needed more support because she was more sensitive, more artistic, more fragile than I was. But resentment, no matter how deeply you bury it, has a way of festering. 3 months before that flood of accusatory text messages, something happened that I never could have predicted. I had started buying a lottery ticket every Friday. Just one ticket, as a small treat to myself after a long work week. It was a harmless indulgence. $5. I would have probably spent on a latte anyway. I never expected to win anything more than maybe $20. But on a rainy Friday evening in October, I checked my numbers while eating leftover pad thai on my lumpy futon, and my entire world shifted on its axis. 6 numbers. All 6 numbers matched. $620,000. I sat there in complete silence for what must have been 20 minutes, just staring at the screen, convinced I was misreading it, convinced this had to be some kind of mistake. I checked the numbers again, and again, and again. I went to the official lottery website and verified them there. I checked the ticket itself, holding it up to the light as if that would somehow reveal it to be a forgery. But it was real, devastatingly, life-changingly real. My first instinct wasn't joy or excitement. It was fear. Deep, gut-wrenching fear because I immediately knew what this money would mean to my family. It would mean expectations, demands, the resurrection of every favor they'd never given me, suddenly reframed as debts I owed. So I did something I had never done before. I kept it secret. I called the lottery office the next Monday and arranged to claim my prize as quietly as possible. After taxes, I would receive approximately $440,000. I met with a financial advisor named Patricia Chen, a sharp woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor who immediately understood when I said, "I need to protect this money from people who will think they have a right to it." Patricia helped me create a plan. First, I would pay off all my student loans immediately, which would free up $800 a month from my budget. Second, I would invest $200,000 in a diversified portfolio for long-term growth. Third, I would keep $50,000 in a high-yield savings account as an emergency fund. Fourth, I would use $100,000 as a down payment on a modest condo, finally building equity instead of throwing money away on rent. And fifth, the remaining $90,000 would cover the costs of getting my CPA certification through additional coursework and exam fees, plus living expenses during the intensive study period. It was a solid, practical plan that would set me up for financial independence and career advancement. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I could breathe, like the crushing weight of debt and worry had been lifted off my shoulders. I was careful, meticulous even. I didn't tell anyone, not my coworkers, not my few friends, and definitely not my family. But secrets, especially ones involving money, have a way of revealing themselves at the worst possible moments. I was in a Zoom call with Patricia, my laptop open on my tiny kitchen table, finalizing some investment paperwork. On my screen, clear as day, was a document showing the lottery disbursement amount $620,000. We were discussing the timeline for purchasing a condo when I heard it. Frantic pounding on my apartment door, so violent that I thought someone might actually break through it. "Aurora, Aurora. Open up. Please. I need you." It was Serafina's voice, shrill with panic, cracking with desperation. I glanced at Patricia's face on the screen. She had gone very still, her expression carefully neutral. "Do you want to reschedule?" she asked quietly. "No," I said, my heart already sinking with dread. "Give me just a minute." I walked to the door, my stomach churning with anxiety. Through the peephole, I could see Serafina, and she looked absolutely wrecked. Her usually immaculate hair hung in tangled clumps around her face. Her mascara had created dark rivers down her cheeks. And she was wearing sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, clothes I had never seen her wear outside of a gym. I opened the door, and she practically fell into my apartment, grabbing my arms with a grip that hurt. "Aurora, thank God you're home. I need your help. We need your help. Damon is in serious trouble, and I don't know what to do. And you're the only one who can fix this." "Serafina, I'm in the middle of an important call," I said, trying to gently extract myself from her grip. "Can this wait?" No, it can't wait." Her eyes were wild, darting around my small apartment. "We need money. Aurora. A lot of money. Damon's business deal fell through, and now we owe $200,000 to some very dangerous people. And if we don't pay them back within 2 weeks, I don't know what they'll do to us. We could lose the house. We could lose everything. $200,000. The number hung in the air between us like a guillotine blade. I felt my face go numb. I felt that old familiar sensation of being expected to sacrifice myself to solve someone else's problems. "Serafina, I don't have that kind of money. I work in accounting. You know what I make?" She pulled away from me then, and her eyes landed on my laptop, still open on the kitchen table, still displaying that fateful screen with Patricia's face and the lottery documents. I watched as her expression shifted from desperate panic to sharp, calculating focus. She walked over to the table, leaned down, and read the screen. The silence that followed was deafening. When she turned back to me, the tears were gone. Her face had transformed into something harder, colder. $620,000, she said flatly. "You won the lottery. You won the lottery. And you didn't tell any of us." "I just won it," I stammered, feeling cornered in my own home. 3 months ago. I was going to tell everyone when I had a plan in place. 3 months. Her voice rose sharply. 3 months you've been sitting on this money while Damon and I have been drowning. While we've been terrified and desperate, what kind of sister are you? The kind who needs to be responsible with a windfall, I said, finding my voice. This money is going to change my life. Serafina, I'm paying off my student loans, getting my CPA, buying a place. I've been planning this carefully. Oh, your precious plans. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Only bitterness. Of course. Perfect Aurora with her perfect plans. Meanwhile, your family is falling apart. But that doesn't matter because you have your spreadsheets and your budgets. She pointed at the screen. You have more than enough to help us and still do all your little plans. You just don't want to. That's not fair, I said, my voice shaking now. This money is mine. I want it. You can't just demand that I give you half of it. Can't I? She crossed her arms, her entire demeanor shifting into something manipulative and ugly. We're family. Aurora, family helps family. Or did you forget that while you were busy being the martyr, putting yourself through school, acting like you're so much better than the rest of us because you don't need anyone? The words hit harder than she probably intended. I didn't have a choice about not needing anyone, I said quietly. No one offered to help. Oh, here we go. Poor Aurora. Always the victim. You know what, fine. Keep your money. Be selfish. But I'm calling Mom and Dad right now. And I'm telling them everything. We'll see what they have to say about their daughter who won the lottery and plan to keep it all to herself while her sister's marriage crumbles. She pulled out her phone, and I felt panic rise in my chest. Serafina. Wait. Can we just talk about this rationally? But she was already dialing. Already walking toward my door. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I came here for help. And you made it clear where I stand. She paused at the threshold, her eyes glittering with something that looked like triumph, mixed with genuine hurt. You know what the saddest part is? I always defended you. When Mom and Dad said you were too rigid, too cold, too focused on money, I told them you just showed love differently. I guess I was wrong. She left, pulling the door closed with deliberate control rather than slamming it, which somehow felt worse. I stood there in my tiny apartment, listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway, and I knew with absolute certainty that everything was about to get much worse. I turned back to my laptop where Patricia was still waiting patiently. I'm so sorry about that, I said, sitting back down at the table. Patricia's expression was sympathetic but firm. Aurora, listen to me very carefully. What just happened is exactly why we create financial plans and boundaries. That money is yours. You earned it by buying that ticket. You don't owe anyone an explanation for how you choose to use it. She paused, leaning closer to her camera. But I want you to prepare yourself. Based on what I just witnessed, your family is going to come at you hard. They're going to use guilt, obligation, and every emotional manipulation in the book. You need to decide right now what your boundaries are and commit to them. Because if you waver even once, they'll sense weakness. I don't want to lose my family, I whispered. Then you need to ask yourself a hard question, Patricia said gently. Is what you have with them actually worth keeping? That question haunted me for the rest of the day and into the night. I tried to work on some spreadsheets, tried to distract myself with a book, but I couldn't focus. My phone started buzzing around 8 p.m. First my mother, then my father, then my mother again. I let them go to voicemail. Then came the text messages. Mom, Serafina told us about your lottery winnings. We need to talk. This involves the whole family. Dad, call me immediately. This is serious. Mom, your sister is in crisis and you're ignoring us. This is not how we raised you. I put my phone on silent and tried to sleep. But rest wouldn't come. Around midnight, I called my friend Marcus, the only person at work who I trusted enough to share personal problems with. Marcus was a senior auditor, 15 years older than me, and had a calm, analytical way of seeing through bullshit that I desperately needed. They're going to try to corner you, Marcus said after I finished explaining the situation. Classic manipulation tactic. They'll orchestrate some kind of intervention or family meeting where you're outnumbered, and they can apply maximum pressure. Whatever you do, I don't agree to meet them on their terms. If you meet at all, it needs to be in a public place where you can leave whenever you want. You think they'd really do that? Aurora, they've been treating you like the family ATM your whole life. Just in more subtle ways. Expecting you to be the responsible one. The one who doesn't need help. The one who makes sacrifices. Now you have actual money. And their sense of entitlement is going to go into overdrive. Trust me on this. Marcus was right. Of course, over the next 3 days, my phone became a weapon of psychological warfare. My parents called 12 times. Serafina called 8. My Aunt Susan, who I saw maybe once a year at Christmas, called to tell me that family unity was more important than money. A second cousin I barely knew sent me a Facebook message about how Serafina has always been there for everyone and how disappointed she was in me. The messages ranged from guilting to angry to manipulative. My mother sent me a long text about how they had sacrificed so much to raise 2 daughters, how they never asked for anything in return, how all they wanted was for their children to love and support each other. My father sent shorter, more directive messages. This is not optional. Family meeting. Saturday. 7 p.m. Morton's Steakhouse. Be there. Morton's Steakhouse. Of course they chose somewhere expensive. Somewhere with an audience of well-dressed diners who would pressure me through social convention to keep my voice down, to be reasonable, to not make a scene. It was a power play, and I recognized it for what it was. But I also knew that avoiding them forever wasn't realistic. If I didn't face this head-on, they would escalate. Show up at my apartment. Call my workplace. Make my life unbearable. So I agreed to go, but I made my own preparations. I called Patricia and told her to proceed with all the financial plans immediately. I paid off my student loans that Friday morning, every single penny, and felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I had been carrying for 7 years. I opened the investment accounts. I put in an offer on a small 1-bedroom condo in Beacon Hill that was within my budget. I made it all real, all official, so that by the time I walked into that restaurant, the money would already be allocated, already spoken for, already protected. Saturday evening arrived too quickly. I dressed carefully in black slacks and a burgundy blouse. Professional but not too formal, wanting to project calm competence. I drove my beat-up Toyota Corolla to Morton's, parked in the lot, and sat in my car for 10 minutes, breathing slowly, preparing myself for battle. When I walked into the restaurant, I spotted them immediately. My parents and Serafina at a table near the back. All 3 of them watching the entrance, like hawks waiting for prey. No Damon. I noticed. Just the 3 of them, presenting a united front. I walked over, my heels clicking on the polished floor, and sat down in the empty 4th chair. Aurora, my mother said, her voice dripping with strained civility. Thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries. My father said, his face stern. He was a tall man, a retired engineer, and he had always been able to make me feel small with just a look. Your sister has explained the situation to us. We're disappointed that you felt the need to hide such a significant windfall from your family, but what's done is done. Now we need to address the crisis at hand. What crisis? I asked, keeping my voice level. Serafina leaned forward, her eyes red-rimmed but dry now. She had composed herself since our last encounter, but there was a brittleness to her that I had never seen before. Damon's business partner embezzled from their company. The deal they were working on fell apart, and now there are debts. Serious debts to some very dangerous people. We need $200,000 to make this go away. Aurora, if we don't pay, we could lose our house. Damon could be in physical danger. Have you gone to the police? I asked. The police can't help with this. My father interjected. This is a business matter. A private matter. What we need is for you to help your sister. You have more than enough money to solve this problem and still have plenty left over for your own needs. I looked at each of them in turn, saw the expectation in their faces, the absolute certainty that I would comply. No, I said simply. The word hung in the air like a grenade. My mother's eyes widened. My father's jaw tightened. Serafina's face flushed red. No, my father repeated, his voice dangerously low. No, I said again, more firmly this time. That money is mine. I have plans for it. I've already paid off my student loans. I'm buying a condo. I'm getting my CPA certification. I'm building a stable financial future for myself. Something I've never had before. Your plans can wait, my mother said, her voice taking on that pleading tone she used when she wanted to manipulate through guilt. Your sister's life is falling apart. Don't you understand the severity of what she's facing? I understand that she and Damon made business decisions that went wrong. I said, I'm sorry about that. But their poor choices are not my financial responsibility. Poor choices. Serafina's voice rose sharply enough that diners at nearby tables glanced over. This wasn't a choice. Aurora, this was a disaster that happened to us. We're victims here. Then be victims together, I said, surprised by the coldness in my own voice. File bankruptcy if you need to. Sell the house. Downsize. Figure it out like I've had to figure everything out my entire adult life. How dare you? My father said, his face reddening. After everything we've done for you, after we raised you, clothed you, fed you, sent you to school. You sent Serafina to school? I corrected him. You paid off her student loans. You bought her a car. You helped with her house down payment. You gave her every advantage while telling me I needed to be independent. So fine. I'm independent. And my independence means my money is my own. My mother reached across the table, trying to grab my hand, but I pulled back. Aurora, sweetheart, please don't be like this. We never meant to make you feel less than. If we favored Serafina, it was only because she needed more support. You were always so capable, so strong. We thought you didn't need as much help. You thought wrong, I said. But you know what? You were right about one thing. I am strong. Strong enough to not let you guilt me into making a terrible financial decision. $200,000 would barely make a dent in what you have, Serafina said, her voice breaking now. You'd still have over $400,000 left. You could still do everything you want to do. But you'd also be saving my marriage. Saving our home. Saving Damon's life, possibly. How can you sit there and say no to that? I felt something crack inside me then. Years of resentment, finally finding its voice. Because for my entire life, I have made myself smaller to make room for you. I accepted less so you could have more. I told myself it was okay that Mom and Dad gave you everything because maybe you needed it more. Maybe I was stronger. Maybe I was the lucky one for being self-sufficient. But you want to know the truth. Serafina, I wasn't stronger. I was just the one nobody thought was worth investing in. That is not true, my mother said, her voice sharp now. It is absolutely true, I said, my voice rising to match hers. Every milestone in my life, I achieved alone. Every struggle, I faced alone. And now, for the first time, I have something that's mine. Something I won through sheer dumb luck. And you can't stand it. You can't stand that I might finally get ahead. That I might finally have what you've always had. This isn't about jealousy, my father said, his voice hard as steel. This is about family. This is about doing the right thing. Your sister needs help, and you have the means to provide it. If you refuse, you're not the person we thought we raised. I stood up then, calmly, deliberately. I reached into my purse and pulled out 5 $20 bills, laying them on the table in front of my untouched water glass. That should cover my portion of the table, I said, since I won't be staying for dinner. Aurora, sit down, my father commanded. No, I met his eyes, saw the shock there that I was defying him. I'm done. I'm done being the one who sacrifices. I'm done being the afterthought. I'm done feeling guilty for wanting a stable life. You want to know what the right thing is? The right thing is me finally choosing myself. If you walk out that door, my father said, his voice low and threatening, you're walking out of this family. Is that what you want? I paused, let the weight of that ultimatum settle over me. Then I smiled, and it felt like the most honest expression I had worn in years. You know what, I think I've been outside this family for a long time. Tonight just makes it official. I turned and walked away, listening to Serafina calling my name, hearing my mother's voice crack, with what might have been real distress or might have been performance. I didn't look back. I walked through that expensive restaurant with my head high, pushed through the heavy doors into the cool Seattle night, and I breathed deeply, fully. For what felt like the first time in my life, in my car, my hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. But it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline, liberation, the terrifying exhilaration of having finally stood up for myself. My phone started buzzing immediately. Calls and texts. A barrage of guilt and anger. I turned it off completely. Drove home in silence. And that night, I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I changed my phone number. I created a new email address. I contacted my landlord about breaking my lease early and found a new apartment across town. A studio in Fremont that nobody in my family would know about. I blocked everyone on social media. I made myself unreachable. And it felt like shedding a skin that had been too tight for years. Marcus came over that afternoon to help me start packing. We ordered pizza and sat on my ratty couch. And he raised a beer and a mock toast. To burning bridges, he said. To burning bridges, I echoed, clinking my bottle against his. How do you feel? He asked. I thought about it. Really examined my emotions. Terrified, I admitted. But also free. Is that weird? Not at all. Marcus said. You just broke a pattern that's existed your entire life. Of course you're terrified. But you did the right thing. Aurora. I know it doesn't feel like it right now. But you protected yourself. Over the next 2 weeks, I moved to my new apartment, started my CPA prep course, and began house hunting in earnest. The calls and texts continued to my old number, which I occasionally checked from a sense of morbid curiosity. My mother sent increasingly desperate messages about family unity and forgiveness. My father sent angry ones about betrayal and selfishness. Serafina sent heart-wrenching ones about how they were about to lose everything, and it was all my fault. But I held firm. I didn't respond. I didn't engage. I focused on building the life I had always wanted. And then, about 3 weeks after our confrontation at Morton's, I received an email at my new address from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "You should know the truth." Against my better judgment, I opened it. The email was from someone named Marcus Chen. No relation to my friend Marcus. He claimed to be a private investigator who had been hired by my parents to look into Damon's business troubles. What he had found, he said, was not embezzlement or a failed deal. It was gambling. Severe, chronic, destructive gambling. Damon owed $200,000 not to business partners, but to a loan shark named Tony Moretti, a man with connections to organized crime in Seattle. The debt had come from a year of losses at underground poker games and trips to the Tulalip Casino. There was no business. There had never been a business. It was all a lie. The investigator attached copies of ATM withdrawals from casinos, screenshots of online gambling accounts, and even security camera footage of Damon at various gambling establishments. He also included a note that my parents had requested this information, but had then tried to bury it when they realized the truth, because they had already committed to helping Serafina and didn't want to admit they had been duped. I stared at the screen, feeling a complicated mixture of vindication and nausea. I had been right to say no, right to protect my money. But the confirmation that my family had been willing to lie to manipulate me into giving up a fortune made me physically sick. I forwarded the email to my personal attorney, a woman named Lisa Park, who I had hired as part of my financial planning process, and asked her to keep it on file in case I needed it later. I didn't contact my family about the email. I didn't confront them or use it as ammunition. I simply let it exist as confirmation that my instincts had been correct, that walking away had been necessary. Then one morning, about a month after the restaurant confrontation, I was at my new apartment, enjoying my first cup of actually good coffee from a French press I had bought myself, when there was a knock at my door. My heart seized. Nobody should know this address. I approached the door cautiously, looked through the peephole, and saw Serafina standing in the hallway. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her face was bare of makeup, and she was wearing jeans and a plain sweater. She looked tired and thin and somehow older than her 32 years. In her hands was a manila envelope. I considered not opening the door, I had worked hard to create this separation, this boundary, but something about the way she was standing there, alone and diminished, made me reconsider. I opened the door but left the chain on. "How did you find me?" I asked. "I hired a PI," she said quietly. "I needed to see you. I needed to tell you the truth." "I already know the truth," I said. "Damon is a gambler. There is no business. You all lied to try to get my money." Her face crumpled. "I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking. "Aurora, I swear to you, I didn't know about the gambling until 2 days ago. I thought it really was a business deal gone wrong. I thought we were victims. But then Tony Moretti showed up at our house with 2 of his associates, and he laid it all out. Every detail, every lie Damon told me, every casino, every poker game, every dollar he pissed away while I thought he was building our future." She held up the envelope. "I filed for divorce yesterday. These are the papers. I came here to tell you that you were right. About everything. And to say I'm sorry." I stared at her through the crack in the door, trying to reconcile this broken version of my sister with the entitled, manipulative woman who had burst into my apartment weeks ago. "Did Mom and Dad know?" I asked. "They know now," she said. "They took out a home equity line of credit for $200,000 to pay off the loan shark because they were terrified of what would happen to me if they didn't. They gave Damon the money 3 days ago. Yesterday, they found out the truth when Tony came back asking for interest payments. He told them everything." She laughed bitterly. The look on Damon's face when he realized Tony had burned him, had told them the truth, instead of keeping his secret. That was almost worth the rest of this nightmare. "Where's Damon now?" I asked. "I kicked him out. Changed the locks. I don't care where he is." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know you don't owe me anything. Aurora, I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness or your help. But I wanted you to know that you were right to walk away. I was being used, and I tried to use you. And I'm so sorry." I felt something inside me soften. Just slightly. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But perhaps the possibility of it someday. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "Survive," she said simply. "Get a full-time job. Raise my kids. Figure out who I am without Damon or Mom and Dad's money or their expectations. Try to be the kind of person who doesn't demand her sister, sacrifice her future to cover up her husband's lies." "You have kids?" I asked. Surprised. "A 3-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter," she said. "You've never met them?" I kept them away because Damon didn't like big family gatherings and I just went along with whatever he wanted." She laughed again. That same bitter sound. "I've been going along with whatever everyone wanted for so long that I don't even know what I want anymore." We stood there in silence for a long moment. The door chain between us somehow symbolic of everything that had broken and might never fully repair. "Finally," I said, "I'm not ready to let you back in. Serafina, I'm not ready to forgive Mom and Dad. I need space to build my life without all of you pulling at me, demanding pieces of me that I don't have to give." "I understand," she said. "I just wanted you to know the truth. And that I'm starting over. And that maybe someday, when you're ready, we could try to have an actual relationship. Not one built on obligation or guilt or favoritism. But something real. Maybe." I said. "Someday." She nodded, set the envelope down on the floor in front of my door, and walked away. I watched her go, then picked up the envelope. Inside were her divorce papers, as she had said, but also something else. A handwritten note on expensive stationery. "Aurora, you were always stronger than me. I resented you for it because strength seemed so easy for you while I felt like I was always drowning. But I realize now that your strength came from having to survive on your own while I was given everything and learned nothing. I'm sorry for every time I took and never gave. I'm sorry for every time Mom and Dad chose me and you pretended it didn't hurt. I'm sorry I brought a monster into our family and then tried to make you pay for my mistake. You owe me nothing. But if you ever want to meet your niece and nephew, if you ever want to try to be sisters for real, I'll be here. Serafina." I closed the door, locked it, and sat down on my couch with the note in my hands. I cried. Finally. letting out years of accumulated pain and resentment and grief for the family that might have been but never was. And when I was done crying, I called Patricia and told her to proceed with the final steps of my financial plan. The months that followed were a blur of activity and growth. I passed all 4 parts of the CPA exam on my first attempt. I closed on my condo, a cozy 1-bedroom with hardwood floors and a small balcony that overlooked the city. I got promoted at work to senior accountant with a substantial raise. I started dating someone I met at a professional networking event, a software engineer named James who had no connection to my past and no agenda beyond enjoying my company. I didn't hear from my parents during this time. Not a word. Not an attempt at contact. Serafina sent occasional emails, updates on her life, pictures of her kids at holidays, small gestures that asked for nothing in return. I responded sometimes, brief and cordial but maintaining distance. Then, about 6 months after the restaurant confrontation, I received an email from my mother asking if we could meet for coffee. The email was short and formal, lacking her usual, emotionally manipulative language. "I would like to speak with you, if you're willing. I understand if you're not. Your mother, Eleanor." I debated for 3 days before responding. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let them stew in the consequences of their choices. But another part of me, in the part that was growing stronger in my new life, wanted to face them from a position of strength, to show them who I had become without their influence. I agreed to meet at Café Brûlé, a trendy coffee shop in Capitol Hill that I chose specifically because it was on my turf, in my new neighborhood. I arrived early, ordered a flat white, and sat at a table by the window, watching the street. I was wearing a charcoal gray suit I had bought for work, my CPA exam success still fresh enough that I felt like celebrating it sartorially. My parents arrived together, and the change in them was startling. My father looked diminished somehow, his shoulders slightly stooped, his hair grayer than I remembered. My mother's face was lined with new wrinkles, and she wore less makeup than usual, giving her a vulnerable quality I had never seen before. They spotted me and walked over, moving slowly, carefully, like people approaching a wild animal they didn't want to spook. "Aurora," my mother said softly. "Thank you for agreeing to see us." "I have an hour," I said, gesturing to the chairs across from me. "My lunch break." They sat, ordered coffees from the hovering barista, and then we all sat in uncomfortable silence until the drinks arrived. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We owe you an apology," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "A real one. Not the half-hearted kind we've given you before when we knew we'd disappointed you but didn't want to actually change." I said nothing, just waited. My mother took over. "We've had a lot of time to think over the past 6 months. We lost our retirement savings helping Serafina with that loan shark. Our house is now mortgaged. Serafina is working 2 jobs trying to keep her home and raise her children alone. And through all of it, we kept asking ourselves how we got here, how we ended up in this position." She paused, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like it was the only thing anchoring her. "The answer is that we created this situation through years of poor choices and favoritism and enabling. We gave Serafina everything because she asked for it," my father continued. "And we gave you nothing because you never asked. We told ourselves that was fair, that you were self-sufficient, that you didn't need us. But the truth is, we took the easy path. It's easier to give money to someone who begs for it than to recognize when someone is struggling in silence." I felt my throat tighten but kept my face neutral. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because we want you to know that we understand what we did wrong," my mother said. "We can't undo the past. We can't give you back the childhood you deserved, the support you needed, the love that should have been equal. But we can acknowledge it. We can own it. And we can tell you that you were right to walk away from us. You were right to protect yourself and your future," my father added. "You were right to refuse to enable Damon's gambling addiction. You were right to set boundaries. And we're sorry that it took losing you for us to understand how badly we failed you." I stared at them. These 2 people who had shaped my life through their absence as much as their presence, and I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Not kite forgiveness, but not anger either. Something more like exhausted acceptance. "I appreciate the apology," I said finally. But apologies don't change what happened. They don't give me back the years I spent, feeling like I wasn't good enough to deserve what Serafina got so easily. We know, my mother said, tears starting to slip down her cheeks. We know. And we're not asking you to forgive us, or to let us back into your life. We just wanted you to hear us say that we were wrong. That you deserved better. And that we're proud of you for succeeding despite us rather than because of us. We sat in silence for a moment, and then Serafina appeared at our table, surprising all of us. She was pushing a stroller with 2 children in it, a toddler boy and an infant girl. I'm sorry, she said quickly, looking at me. Mom told me you were meeting, and I thought maybe, if you were okay with it, I could introduce you to your niece and nephew. I looked at the children, both of them staring up at me with curious eyes, and felt something crack in my chest. The little boy had Serafina's nose, and the baby girl had a dimple in her chin that I recognized from old photos of our grandmother. They were innocent of all the adult drama, these 2 small humans. And looking at them, I realized something important. Holding on to anger was hurting me more than it was hurting anyone else. What are their names? I asked quietly. This is Marcus, Serafina said, gesturing to the boy. And I felt a small smile tug at my lips at the coincidence of the name. And this is Lily. I reached out and let Marcus grab my finger in his small hand. Hi, Marcus, I said. Hi, Lily. They don't have college funds, Serafina said quietly. I'm barely keeping us afloat with rent and daycare. But I'm making it work. I'm learning what you already knew. That sometimes you have to build your life from nothing. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw someone different from the person who had burst into my apartment demanding money. This version of Serafina had been humbled by reality, shaped by consequences, forced to become the kind of person who survives rather than expects to be saved. You're doing it right, I said. Building from nothing. That's how you learn what matters. I glanced at my parents, then back at Serafina and her children. I'm not ready to have regular family dinners or pretend everything is fine, I said carefully. But I'm also not interested in carrying around anger forever. It's too heavy, and I have better things to do with my energy. What does that mean? My mother asked hopefully. It means I'm setting boundaries, I said firmly. I'll respond to emails if you keep them respectful. I'll see you occasionally if it's on my terms. And I'll be in my niece and nephew's lives because they deserve better than to grow up in a family divided by old wounds. I paused, making sure they were all listening. But I will never, ever sacrifice my financial security or my peace of mind for any of you again. That money I won is building my future, and my future is not negotiable. We understand? My father said. And we respect that. I stood up then, setting $5 on the table for my coffee, a mirror of the gesture I had made 6 months earlier at Morton's Byandig. But this time without anger. I need to get back to work, I said. But Serafina, if you want to email me some pictures of the kids, I'd like that. I will, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I walked out of that cafe feeling something I hadn't felt in years light. Not happy. Not yet. But unburdened in a way that felt like the beginning of something new. 5 years passed, and they were the best years of my life. I got my MBA from the University of Washington, paid for in cash from my investment dividends. I was promoted to accounting manager at my firm, managing a team of 5 people. I married James in a small ceremony at a botanical garden, with Marcus and a few close friends in attendance but no family. Not because I was punishing them, but because I had built a new family, one based on choice and mutual respect rather than obligation. I bought a small house in Ballard with a yard and a garden. I traveled to Japan, to Ireland, to Peru, all places I had dreamed about but never thought I could afford. I sponsored 3 foster children through an international charity, making sure other kids had opportunities I had to fight for. And I did something else, something that mattered more than anything else. I opened 2 529 college savings accounts, one for Marcus and one for Lily. Every month, I deposited $1,000 into each account. By the time they were ready for college, they would have full tuition paid for at any state school, or a substantial contribution toward a private university. I didn't tell Serafina about the accounts for the first 3 years. I wanted to make sure she had truly changed, that this wasn't another manipulation, another way for my family to take from me. But she proved herself through consistency. She worked hard, raised her children with patience and love, and never once asked me for money. She sent updates and photos, came to my wedding with her kids, and slowly, carefully, we rebuilt something that resembled a sibling relationship. When Marcus turned 8 and Lily turned 6, I finally told Serafina about the college funds over dinner at my house. We were sitting in my backyard, watching the kids play on the swing set James had built, and I handed her a folder with the account statements. She opened it, read the documents, and started crying. "Aurora, I can't accept this. It's not for you," I said gently. "It's for them. I'm not doing this to rescue you or to make up for the past. I'm doing this because no child should start their adult life drowning in debt like I did. I'm breaking a pattern. Serafina, our parents gave you everything and me nothing, and it damaged both of us in different ways. These accounts are me making sure the next generation gets something different. Something fair." She wiped her eyes and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, genuine respect. "You're a better person than I ever was. I'm just a person who learned that generosity and boundaries can coexist," I said. "I can help my niece and nephew without sacrificing my own stability. That's the difference between us and our parents. They gave without wisdom. I'm giving with intention." That conversation happened 2 years ago. Now, at 36 years old, I'm sitting in my home office, looking at my investment portfolio, which has grown to over $800,000 through careful management and compound interest. My house is paid off. My retirement accounts are maxed out. I'm on track to retire early if I want to, or to keep working because I love my job. Last month, a reporter from a local business magazine interviewed me for an article about financial success stories. She asked how I had built wealth so quickly at such a young age. I thought about lying, about giving her the usual answers about hard work and smart investing. But instead, I told her the truth. I won the lottery. I said, "But that's not what made me wealthy. What made me wealthy was learning to value myself enough to protect what I had. My family wanted me to give away a huge portion of my winnings to cover up someone else's mistakes, to continue a pattern of sacrifice and neglect that had defined my entire life. For the first time, I said no. For the first time, I chose myself. And that decision, that boundary, that was worth more than any amount of money." The article came out last week with the headline, "How One Woman's Lottery Win Taught Her the True Value of Saying No." My parents saw it. They emailed to say they were proud of me. Serafina shared it on her Facebook page, with a caption about how her sister was her hero. I don't think I'm anyone's hero. I'm just someone who got tired of being small and decided to take up space. I'm someone who learned that loving yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. I'm someone who discovered that the family you choose is sometimes more important than the family you're born into. But if my story helps even one person recognize their own worth, helps one person set the boundaries they need, helps one person understand that you can break generational patterns without destroying yourself in the process, then sharing it was worth it. Standing here now, looking back at the woman I was 7 years ago, crying in my cramped studio apartment, drowning in debt, desperate for approval from people who would never give it. I want to reach back through time and tell her something. I want to tell her that the pain is temporary but the strength is permanent. I want to tell her that one day she'll stand in her own home, financially independent, emotionally healthy, and genuinely happy. And she'll barely recognize the person she used to be. I want to tell her that the best revenge isn't making them suffer. It's making yourself succeed. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation? Have you ever been in a situation where saying yes would have meant sacrificing your future? What did you do? And how did it turn out? Drop your stories in the comments below because I know I'm not the only one who's faced this impossible choice. And if this story resonated with you, if you've been the family scapegoat, or the one expected to sacrifice, or the one who finally said no, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more real-life stories about setting boundaries and reclaiming your power. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to protect yourself, even from the people who are supposed to protect you. Remember, you don't owe anyone your future. Not your parents. Not your siblings. Not anyone. Your life is yours to build. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and ultimately for others, is to build it well. Thanks for listening to my story. I'll see you in the next one.